Arriving one after the other, dinghy boats form a steady line as they approach the coast of Lampedusa.
They came to a boat from Tunisia, on a boat from Tunisia or Libya, but they were passing
Italy just pulled off what every European country said was impossible. In 2024, sea arrivals plummeted by over 60%. We're talking about a drop from 157,000 people in 2023 to just 66,000. That's 91,000 fewer migrants crossing the deadliest migration route on Earth. Politicians celebrated. Headlines screamed success. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was hailed as a visionary. Europe took notes. The UK's Prime Minister flew to Rome to learn her secrets. But here's what nobody saw coming. By April 2025, the whole thing started falling apart. The numbers stopped lying, and the truth became impossible to hide. Let's rewind to 2023, when Italy was at its breaking point. The island of Lampedusa became ground zero for Europe's migration crisis. Just 6,000 residents living on a tiny dot in the Mediterranean, and they were drowning in chaos. Some days saw 2,000 migrants arriving in 24 hours. Think about that for a second. In a single day, the population of this small island swelled by a third. A reception center built for 400 people was stuffed with 7,000 desperate souls. Imagine cramming nearly 20 times the capacity into a space barely big enough for a fraction of that. The facilities collapsed under the pressure. Local authorities were screaming that they couldn't handle it anymore. Mayors warned their communities were on the edge of collapse. The Italian government was bleeding $1.7 billion annually just trying to keep up with the flow. Interior Minister Matteo Piantedosi pointed fingers at massive and uncontrolled arrivals, but pointing fingers doesn't stop boats. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni knew something had to change, and fast. So she rolled out a three-part strategy that would completely reshape European migration policy and spark debates that continue today. Externalize, criminalize, legalize. Three words that changed everything. Here's where it gets wild. And this is the part most people don't understand. Italy's first move was to stop migrants before they even reached Italian waters. They didn't just patrol their own coastline. They paid other countries to do the dirty work hundreds of miles away from Italian territory. The EU released $127 million to Tunisia, tied directly to migration control. But this wasn't just financial aid. This was a transaction. Money in exchange for blocking human movement. Shortly after the cash started flowing, the Tunisian National Guard started collectively expelling over 100 migrants to the Algerian border, including children and possible asylum seekers. Reports emerged of people being dumped in the desert without water or shelter. The deal was brutal, but effective from Italy's perspective. European money in exchange for Tunisian coast guards intercepting boats, denying port access, and pushing people back into the desert. Tunisia became Europe's offshore border guard, doing what EU law wouldn't allow European forces to do directly. It was outsourcing with a dark twist. Then there was Libya, and this is where things get even more controversial. Between January and October 2022 alone, nearly 20,000 individuals were intercepted and returned to Libya by the Libyan Coast Guard. Over 200 were reported dead or missing at sea during that same period. Libya, a country torn apart by civil war, where the UN has documented systematic torture, abuse, and forced labor in detention centers. Italy gave the Libyan Coast Guard 5 fully equipped boats, and the EU threw in $57.2 million for border management. By September 2023, nearly 12,000 people had been intercepted and returned to Libya. The UN considers Libya unsafe, but that didn't stop the cash or the boats. Human rights organizations documented horrific conditions in Libyan detention camps. Stories of beating, starvation, and extortion flooded out. But from Rome's perspective, the policy was working. Fewer boats meant fewer headlines, and in 2024, the numbers seemed to prove them right. But that victory lap didn't last long. By April 2025, the cracks started showing, and they weren't small cracks. They were earthquake-level fractures. Arrivals spiked by 35% compared to the same month in 2024. Over 6,400 people landed on Italian shores in just 30 days. The government had claimed a 30% reduction just weeks earlier, celebrating their success in press conferences and political rallies. But that spike canceled it out completely, erasing months of supposed progress overnight. By late June, Italy had recorded nearly 30,000 irregular sea arrivals, a 17% increase compared to the same period in 2024. Even more shocking, departures from Libya surged by 116%, now accounting for 91% of all arrivals. Think about what that means. The very country Italy paid millions to stop migrants was now the primary launching point. The externalization strategy was backfiring in real time, and it was impossible to spin. What happened? Tunisia's operations in Sfax displaced over 9,000 migrants, but instead of stopping them, it just pushed them toward more dangerous sea crossings. People who would have tried to cross from Tunisia were now being pushed into the desert, where they either died or found their way to Libya. From Libya, desperate and traumatized, they took to the sea in even more dangerous conditions. Italy hadn't stopped the flow. They just redirected it, made it deadlier, and now it was flooding back with a vengeance. The policy created a pressure cooker, and by 2025, it was exploding. But Italy's most controversial move, the one that made international headlines and sparked debates in parliaments across Europe, was something nobody had ever tried before. In November 2023, Meloni signed a deal to build 2 migration centers on Albanian soil, run entirely by Italian personnel. Let that sink in for a moment. Italy was building detention facilities in another country, staffing them with Italian security and processing asylum claims under Italian law. The facilities near an Air Force base in Jadar and Shenzhen could hold up to 3,000 migrants, with Italian judges hearing cases by video from Rome. It was a legal fiction, an extraterritorial jurisdiction that pushed the boundaries of international law. The price tag was outrageous, $675 million over 5 years to process up to 36,000 asylum seekers annually. That's nearly 100 people per day, every single day. Break that down per person, and Italy was spending thousands of euros to process each migrant offshore instead of on Italian soil. Why? Optics, politics, the appearance of taking decisive action. Italy was now processing asylum seekers in another country under Italian law, staffed by Italian officials. Critics called it everything from a modern Guantanamo to efficient offshore triage. Human rights groups went ballistic, arguing it violated international asylum law and set a dangerous precedent. But Meloni stood firm, calling it a model for Europe's future. The centers opened in October 2024 with big fanfare. Politicians posed for photos. Meloni gave speeches about Italy leading Europe into a new era of migration management. Media crews documented the gleaming new facilities, but within days, reality hit hard. The first group of 16 migrants sent to Albania included people from Egypt and Bangladesh. Italian courts immediately intervened, ruling their countries of origin couldn't be considered entirely safe. The migrants were sent back to Italy. The legal challenges came fast and brutal. By November, another group of 7 migrants faced the same fate. Courts blocked their detention, citing EU law that says a country can only be deemed safe if the entire country is safe, not just parts of it. Egypt has documented human rights abuses. Bangladesh faces political instability. The legal framework Meloni's government relied on collapsed under judicial scrutiny. By early 2025, the Albania centers had been effectively suspended for asylum processing. The $675 million gamble had turned into one of the most expensive failures in European migration history. In March 2025, the Italian government pivoted, announcing the centers would now be used as deportation hubs for rejected asylum seekers awaiting repatriation. But even this raised new legal questions. In April 2025, Italy sent 40 rejected asylum seekers to Albania. Human rights groups immediately challenged the move, arguing there was no legal basis in Italian law, EU legislation, or the Italy-Albania agreement for using the centers this way. The facilities, built with so much political capital and public money, sat largely empty, a monument to failed policy. By August 2025, the European Court of Justice dealt the final blow, ruling that Italy's designation of safe countries didn't meet EU legal standards and couldn't be used to justify transfers to Albania. While Italy was building detention centers abroad and dealing with legal chaos, they were waging economic warfare at home against the very people trying to save lives. Interior Minister Matteo Piantedosi unleashed rules that turned saving lives into a logistical nightmare. If an NGO ship rescued migrants off Sicily, they weren't allowed to drop them at the nearest port. Instead, they were ordered to sail hundreds of miles north, sometimes to Ravenna, which is on the opposite side of Italy. Burning through days of travel, tens of thousands of euros in fuel, and precious time that could be spent saving more lives. To outsiders, it looked like bureaucracy. But make no mistake, this was economic warfare, a calculated strategy to bleed humanitarian groups dry, one rescue at a time. The message was clear and brutal. One rescue per trip or face detention, fines reaching hundreds of thousands of euros, and ship seizures lasting months. Conduct multiple rescues in a single trip, even if boats are sinking right in front of you and you face criminal charges.